They said a man couldn't raise girls alone. They said two orphans had no business under a bachelor's roof. They said it wouldn't last. But when 10-year-old Eliza Hartley pulled a tattered sheet over her mother's body and dragged her sobbing sister into the Montana dust, she wasn't looking for what was proper. She was looking for what would keep them breathing. And when the door of that lonely ranch swung open, revealing a grief-scarred cowboy who'd buried his own child, none of them knew they were about to build something the law couldn't define and blood couldn't claim. This is their story, raw, relentless, and real. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see just how far these two barefoot girls have traveled. The fever had taken 3 days to kill her. Eliza Hartley sat on the splintered floor of their cabin, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the still form beneath the quilt. Her mother's face looked wrong in the silence, too pale, too slack, like something carved from wax and left in the sun too long. Flies had started gathering near the window. The August heat made the air inside thick and sour. Maisie whimpered from the corner, curled into herself like a kicked dog. "Mama's sleeping," the 6-year-old whispered for the 10th time that hour. "She's just sleeping, Liza." Eliza didn't answer. Her throat had gone dry hours ago, and the last of the water sat in a clay jug by the door, barely 2 inches left. She'd given Maisie the last biscuit that morning, a hardtack thing that crumbled to dust in the girl's small hands. There was nothing else. No neighbors within 5 miles, no family coming. Their father had died in a mine collapse the winter before, and their mother had worked herself sick trying to keep them fed on laundry and mending until the fever came and took what little was left. Now it was just the two of them, and a body going cold on a straw mattress. Eliza was 10 years old. She didn't know how to dig a grave in ground baked hard as iron. She didn't know any prayers worth saying. What she knew was this: if they stayed in this cabin, they would die here too, slowly, hungry, alone. She stood, her bare feet silent on the rough planks, and walked to the door. Through the gap in the wood, she could see the valley stretching out in shades of brown and gold, the road cutting through it like a scar. And there, maybe 2 miles distant, a thin ribbon of smoke rose from somewhere beyond the ridge. Smoke meant fire. Fire meant people. People meant a chance. She turned back to Maisie, who was rocking herself now, humming something their mother used to sing. "Maisie," Eliza said quietly, "we have to go." The little girl's head snapped up, eyes wide and red-rimmed. "We can't leave Mama." "We have to." "But she'll wake up and we won't be here." "She's not waking up." The words came out harder than Eliza meant them to, and Maisie flinched. Eliza crouched down, gentling her voice. "She's gone, Maisie, and if we stay, we'll be gone too. Do you understand?" Maisie's lip trembled. She looked past Eliza to the bed, to the quilt that didn't rise and fall anymore, and something in her small face broke. "I don't want to leave her alone," she whispered. "I don't either." Eliza reached out and took her sister's hand. It was so small, the bones like bird wings beneath the skin. "But Mama would want us to live, so we're going to walk to that smoke, and we're going to find someone who'll help us, all right?" Maisie didn't say yes. She didn't say anything. But when Eliza tugged her gently to her feet, she followed. Eliza took one last look at the woman on the bed. Her mother, who had sung to them and stitched their clothes and held them through winter nights when the cabin walls shook with wind. She wanted to say something, wanted to make it mean something, but her throat closed up, and all she could do was pull the quilt higher, covering her mother's face. Then she took Maisie's hand and walked out the door. The road was a furnace. Dust rose with every step, coating their legs, their arms, their faces. The sun beat down without mercy, and within an hour Eliza's lips had cracked and Maisie was stumbling. They had no shoes. Those had worn through months ago, and the hard-packed dirt burned their feet with every step. "Liza," Maisie whimpered, "it hurts." "I know. I'm thirsty." "I know. Can we stop?" "Not yet." But Maisie's legs were giving out. She was too small, too weak, and the heat was eating her alive. Eliza could see it in the way her steps slowed, the way her head drooped. "Come here," Eliza said, kneeling. She turned her back. "Climb on." Maisie wrapped her thin arms around Eliza's neck and her legs around her waist, light as a sack of straw. Eliza stood, swaying under the weight, and kept walking. The smoke was closer now. She could see the shape of a roof beyond the ridge, dark wood against the pale sky. Her feet screamed with every step. Her back ached. Her vision swam. But she didn't stop. She thought about her mother, lying still in that cabin. She thought about the winter before, when their father's body had come back from the mine in pieces. She thought about all the nights she'd heard her mother crying when she thought the girls were asleep. And she kept walking. The ranch sat in a shallow valley, a weathered two-story house flanked by a barn and a corral. Chickens scratched in the yard. A cow lowed somewhere out of sight. Smoke curled from the chimney, thin and steady. Eliza staggered up the porch steps and set Maisie down. The little girl slumped against the wall, eyes half closed. Eliza's hand shook as she raised one fist and knocked. Nothing. She knocked again, harder. The door opened. The man who stood there was tall and lean, maybe 35, with dark hair and a face carved from hard angles. He wore a faded shirt rolled to the elbows and trousers stained with work. His eyes were the color of winter sky, pale, sharp, wary. He looked at Eliza, then at Maisie, then back at Eliza. "Help us," Eliza said, her voice cracked. "Please." The man didn't move, didn't speak. His gaze flicked over them. Two skeletal girls in rags, barefoot and covered in dust, one barely standing and the other half conscious against the wall. For a long, terrible moment, Eliza thought he was going to close the door. Then he stepped aside. "Get in," he said quietly. The inside of the house was cool and dim, the kind of quiet that felt heavy. The man led them to a table in the kitchen and gestured for them to sit. Maisie collapsed into a chair, her head lolling forward. Eliza sat beside her, every muscle in her body screaming. The man moved to the stove, where a pot of something was simmering. He ladled broth into 2 tin bowls and set them on the table, then fetched a pitcher of water and 2 cups. "Drink slow," he said. "You'll make yourself sick otherwise." Eliza didn't argue. She lifted the cup to her lips and drank, the water cool and clean and the best thing she'd ever tasted. Beside her, Maisie gulped hers down too fast and coughed, water spilling down her chin. The man refilled her cup without comment. He sat across from them, arms folded, watching. "Where are your people?" he asked. Eliza set down her cup. "Dead." "Both parents?" "Yes." "Any other family?" "No." She hesitated. "There's an uncle, Silas, but we don't know where he is. Mama said he wasn't safe." The man's jaw tightened slightly. "How long since your mother passed?" "This morning." He was quiet for a moment, his gaze moving between them. "You walked here from where?" "The old Hartley cabin, 5 miles south. Barefoot. We don't have shoes." He looked at their feet, blistered, bleeding, caked in dust, and something shifted in his expression. Not pity exactly. Something darker. Something that looked like recognition. "What's your name?" he asked Eliza. "Eliza Hartley. This is my sister Maisie." "I'm Colt Brennan." He nodded toward the house around them. "This is my place. You're safe here." Eliza wanted to believe him, but she'd learned not to trust easy promises. "What happens now?" she asked. Colt leaned back in his chair, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "Now you eat, then you rest. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the next step." "Are you going to send us away?" His eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw something beneath the hardness, something raw and unguarded. "No," he said. "I'm not." He gave them his daughter's room. Eliza didn't know he'd had a daughter until she saw the space, small, with a narrow bed and a chest of drawers, a rag doll sitting on the windowsill. Everything was neat, untouched, like the girl who'd lived there had just stepped out and would be back any moment. "She died 4 years ago," Colt said from the doorway. His voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "Fever took her, same as your mother." Eliza looked at the doll, its button eyes staring at nothing. "I'm sorry," she said. "So am I." He gestured to the bed. "You two can sleep here. I'll be downstairs if you need anything." Maisie was already climbing onto the mattress, her eyes drooping. Eliza followed, and the moment her head touched the pillow, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. She heard Colt's footsteps retreat down the hall, heard the soft creak of the stairs, and then, for the first time in days, she let herself close her eyes. She woke in the middle of the night to the sound of Maisie crying. The little girl was curled into a ball, her face pressed into the pillow, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Eliza reached out and pulled her close, wrapping her arms around her. "I want Mama," Maisie choked out. "I know. Why did she have to die?" "I don't know. What's going to happen to us?" Eliza didn't have an answer for that, so she just held her sister and let her cry, staring into the darkness and trying not to think about the future. Morning came with the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Eliza woke slowly, disoriented, her body aching in unfamiliar ways. Beside her, Maisie was still asleep, her face peaceful for the first time in days. Eliza slipped out of bed and padded downstairs, following the smell. Colt was at the stove, turning strips of bacon in a cast-iron skillet. He glanced up when she appeared, then nodded toward the table. "Sit. Food'll be ready in a minute." Eliza sat, watching him work. He moved with the efficiency of someone used to doing things alone. No wasted motion, no unnecessary noise. When he set a plate in front of her, bacon, eggs, a thick slice of bread, she stared at it like it might vanish. "Eat," he said. She did. The food was simple, but it was hot and filling, and by the time Maisie stumbled downstairs, rubbing her eyes, Eliza felt almost human again. Colt fed Maisie the same way he'd fed Eliza, quietly, without fuss. When they were done, he poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. "We need to talk," he said. Eliza's stomach tightened. "About what?" "About what happens next." He took a sip of coffee, watching them over the rim of the cup. "You can't stay here indefinitely without people asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that end with you two in an orphanage." Maisie's eyes went wide. "No, that's not going to happen," Colt said quickly. "But we need to be smart about this. I'm a single man. You're two young girls. People in town are going to talk. And when they talk, officials start poking around. We need to make this look legitimate." "How?" Eliza asked. Colt set down his cup. "I don't know yet, but I'll figure something out." But he took them into town that afternoon. The ride in the wagon was Eliza's first taste of normalcy in months. Maisie sat between them, clutching the rag doll from the bedroom, and Colt drove in silence, his eyes on the road. The town of Coldwater was small. A general store, a church, a saloon, a handful of houses scattered along the main street. Colt stopped the wagon in front of the store and helped them down. "We're getting you shoes," he said, "and clothes that fit." Inside, the store was dim and crowded with goods, bolts of fabric, canned food, tools, saddles. A woman stood behind the counter, middle-aged and sharp-eyed, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked up when they entered, and her gaze lingered on the girls. "Colt Brennan," she said slowly. "Didn't expect to see you in town." "Evelyn," Colt nodded. "Need some supplies." The woman, Evelyn, came around the counter, her eyes still on Eliza and Maisie. "And who are these two?" "They're staying with me for a while." "Staying with you?" Evelyn's tone was carefully neutral. "That's unusual." "Their mother died. They had nowhere else to go." Evelyn's expression softened slightly. She crouched down to Maisie's level, studying her. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Maisie," the little girl whispered. "And you?" Evelyn looked at Eliza. "Eliza." Evelyn straightened, her gaze shifting back to Colt. "You know what people are going to say." "I know." "And you're doing this anyway." "I am." For a long moment, Evelyn just looked at him. Then she sighed and shook her head. "You always were stubborn." She turned to the girls. "Come on then, let's get you fitted." Evelyn had also pressed a small sack of peppermint sticks into Maisie's hands, ignoring the girl's wide-eyed stare. "You take care of them, Colt," Evelyn said as they climbed back into the wagon. "I will. And if you need help, I'll ask." Evelyn nodded, but her expression was troubled. As they drove away, Eliza glanced back and saw her standing in the doorway, arms folded, watching them disappear down the road. What? The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Colt woke before dawn and worked the ranch, mending fences, tending the cattle, chopping wood. Eliza helped where she could, learning to gather eggs and milk the cow and scrub pots until her hands were raw. Maisie was too small for heavy work, but she fed the chickens and swept the floors and slowly, carefully, began to smile again. At night, they ate together at the kitchen table. Colt didn't talk much, but he listened when Eliza told stories to Maisie. And sometimes he asked questions about their mother, their father, the cabin they'd left behind. He never asked about Silas, but Eliza could tell he was thinking about it. 3 weeks after they'd arrived, the trouble started. Eliza was in the yard hanging laundry when she saw the wagon coming up the road, a flatbed driven by a man in a dark suit, another man beside him. They pulled to a stop in front of the house, and Colt came out onto the porch, his face unreadable. "Mr. Brennan," the man in the suit said. "I'm Samuel Dorsey, county clerk. This is Constable Hayes. We're here to discuss the 2 girls in your care." Colt's jaw tightened. "What about them?" "We've received reports that you're housing minors without legal guardianship. Is that true?" "They had nowhere else to go." "That may be, but the law requires proper arrangements for orphaned children. If you're unable to provide legal custody, they'll need to be placed in an institution." "No." Eliza's voice rang out sharp and clear. She stepped forward, her hands still wet from the laundry. "We're not going to an orphanage." Dorsey looked at her, his expression softening slightly. "I understand this is difficult, miss, but you don't understand anything." Eliza's voice shook, but she didn't back down. "We walked 5 miles barefoot to get here. Our mother was dead and we were starving, and Mr. Brennan gave us food and a place to sleep when no one else would. You want to take us away from that? It's not a matter of want. Then make it legal." Colt's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Tell me what I need to do and I'll do it." Dorsey hesitated. "You'd need to establish legal guardianship. That requires proof of relationship or marriage to someone who can serve as a maternal figure. As a single man, you don't qualify." "Then I'll get married." The words hung in the air like smoke. Dorsey blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "You heard me?" Colt's gaze was steady, unflinching. "I'll find someone to marry. That'll make it legal, won't it?" "Well, yes, technically, but then consider it done." Dorsey exchanged a glance with the constable, then looked back at Colt. "You have 2 weeks, Mr. Brennan. If you can't produce a marriage certificate by then, the girls will be removed from your care." He tipped his hat and climbed back into the wagon. Eliza watched them drive away, her heart pounding. When they were gone, she turned to Colt. "You can't marry someone just because of us," she said. Colt looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Watch me," he said. What time? He rode into town the next morning. Eliza watched him go, standing on the porch with Maisie beside her. The little girl tugged on her sleeve. "What's he doing?" Maisie asked. "I don't know," Eliza said, but she had a feeling she did. Done. Colt found Evelyn Shaw in the store, restocking shelves. She looked up when he walked in and her eyebrows rose. "Twice in 1 month. Should I be worried?" "I need to ask you something," Colt said. Evelyn set down the crate she was holding and crossed her arms. "All right, ask." "Will you marry me?" For a long moment, Evelyn just stared at him. Then she laughed, short, sharp, disbelieving. "You've lost your mind." "I'm serious." "Colt, you can't just... The county's going to take those girls if I don't find a wife. They'll put them in an orphanage. I can't let that happen." Evelyn's laughter died. She studied him, her eyes narrowing. "You barely know them. I know enough. And you think marrying a stranger is the answer? You're not a stranger. We've spoken maybe a dozen times in 5 years. Then this'll be the most important conversation we've ever had." Colt stepped closer, his voice low and urgent. "I'm not asking you to love me, Evelyn. I'm asking you to help me save 2 little girls who've already lost everything. If you say no, I'll understand. But if you say yes, I'll say yes." Colt stopped. "What?" Evelyn let out a long breath, shaking her head. "I'll say yes, but not because I think this is a good idea, and not because I believe it'll work. I'll say yes because those girls deserve better than what this world's given them so far." Colt felt something loosen in his chest, something he hadn't realized was clenched tight. "Thank you," he said quietly. Evelyn gave him a wry smile. "Don't thank me yet. We still have to convince the whole town this is real." They were married 3 days later in front of the county clerk, with Eliza and Maisie as witnesses. There was no ceremony, no vows, no kiss, just signatures on a piece of paper and a thin gold band that Colt slipped onto Evelyn's finger. When it was done, Dorsey handed Colt the marriage certificate and nodded. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Brennan. The girls can stay." Eliza felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. Beside her, Maisie was clutching the rag doll, her small face lit with something that looked like hope. They rode back to the ranch in silence, Colt and Evelyn on the wagon seat, Eliza and Maisie in the back. When they arrived, Evelyn climbed down and stood looking at the house, her expression unreadable. "Well," she said, "I suppose this is home now." Colt nodded. "I'll get your things from town tomorrow." "No need, I travel light." She turned to the girls. "Which room is mine?" Eliza hesitated. "We're in the small one upstairs, the big one's Mr. Brennan's." Evelyn glanced at Colt. "We'll figure it out." That night, Evelyn took the downstairs guest room. Eliza lay awake in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the house, the creak of floorboards, the rustle of fabric, the low murmur of voices from below. Beside her, Maisie was already asleep, her breathing soft and even. Eliza thought about her mother, buried alone in the hard Montana ground. She thought about the cabin, empty now, the door hanging open to the wind, and she thought about the man and woman downstairs who had married each other to save 2 girls they barely knew. It didn't make sense, but it was real. And for the first time in months, Eliza let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they were going to be all right. The next morning, Evelyn was up before dawn, already dressed and moving through the kitchen like she'd lived there for years. When Eliza came downstairs, she found her making coffee and frying eggs, her movements brisk and efficient. "Good morning," Evelyn said without looking up. "Sleep well?" "Yes, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am. Makes me feel old." She glanced at Eliza. "You can call me Evelyn, or Mrs. Brennan, if you prefer, but not ma'am." "Yes, Mrs. Brennan." Evelyn smiled faintly. "That'll do." Colt appeared a few minutes later, dressed for work, and stopped short when he saw Evelyn at the stove. "You didn't have to—" "I know," Evelyn said, "but I'm here now, and I'm not going to sit idle. If we're going to make this work, we all pull our weight. Understood?" Colt nodded slowly. "Understood." They ate breakfast in silence, eggs, bacon, bread. When they were done, Colt headed out to the barn, and Evelyn began clearing the table. Eliza moved to help, and for a while they worked side by side, the only sound the clatter of dishes and the splash of water. Finally, Evelyn spoke. "I know this isn't what you expected," she said quietly. "And I know it's strange for all of us, but I want you to know something, Eliza. I didn't marry Colt because I had to. I married him because I wanted to help you and your sister, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure you're safe and cared for. Do you believe me?" Eliza looked at her, this sharp-eyed, sharp-tongued woman who had upended her entire life for 2 strangers, and nodded. "I believe you," she said. Evelyn smiled. "Good. Then let's get to work." The days turned into weeks, and slowly, carefully, the 4 of them began to build something that looked like a family. Evelyn took over the cooking and the cleaning, running the household with the same brisk efficiency she'd shown in the store. Colt worked the ranch, and Eliza helped where she could, feeding the animals, mending fences, learning to ride the old mare in the barn. Maisie followed them everywhere, chattering constantly, her laughter filling the house in a way it hadn't been filled in years. And at night, they sat together at the table and ate, and sometimes Colt would tell stories about the ranch, or Evelyn would share news from town, and it almost felt normal. Almost. Because beneath the surface, there was still a fragile, unspoken truth. This was an arrangement, a marriage of convenience, a solution to a problem. Not a real family. Not yet. But Eliza could see the way Evelyn's eyes softened when Maisie hugged her. Could see the way Colt's shoulders relaxed when the girls were safe in bed. Could feel the careful, tentative threads of something real beginning to weave between them. and she dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, it could become more. Then on a cold October morning, everything changed. Eliza was in the barn when she heard the wagon. She looked up and saw a man climbing down, tall, thin, dressed in a fine suit that looked out of place against the rough wood and dirt. He had dark hair slicked back with oil and a sharp, calculating face. Colt was already walking toward him, his expression hard. "Can I help you?" Colt asked. The man smiled. "I'm looking for Eliza and Maisie Hartley. I was told they're here." Eliza's blood went cold. She knew that voice. "Who's asking?" Colt said. "Silas Hartley. I'm their uncle." Eliza's legs locked. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stare at the man standing in their yard like a shadow from a nightmare she'd thought was over. Silas Hartley. She hadn't seen him since she was 8 years old, but she remembered. Remembered the way her mother's face had gone pale when he'd shown up at their old house, demanding money. Remembered the shouting, the threats, the way her father had thrown him out and told him never to come back. Remembered her mother whispering to her later, "If anything ever happens to us, Eliza, you stay away from that man. You hear me? You stay away." Now he was here. Colt's stance shifted, his body angling between Silas and the barn where Eliza stood frozen. "The girls are fine where they are." Silas's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm sure they are. But they're family, Mr. Brennan, and family belongs with family. They're being cared for." "By a stranger?" Silas shook his head, the picture of concerned kinship. "I appreciate what you've done for them, truly. But their father was my brother. That makes those girls my responsibility." "Where were you when their mother was dying?" Colt's voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath it. "Where were you when they were starving in that cabin with no food and no help coming?" Silas's expression flickered, just for a moment, before smoothing back into practiced sympathy. "I didn't know. I've been working in the Dakota Territory, mining claims. Word only reached me last week. Soon as I heard, I came straight here." "Convenient timing." "I don't appreciate your tone, Mr. Brennan." Silas straightened, his voice taking on an edge. "I'm here to collect my nieces and provide them with a proper home. Now, if you'll kindly—" "No." The word cut through the air like a gunshot. Silas blinked. "Excuse me? You heard me. The girls stay here." "You have no legal right. I have a marriage certificate that says otherwise. Evelyn and I are their legal guardians now. The county approved it." For the first time, Silas's composure cracked. His eyes narrowed, calculating. "A marriage certificate. How efficient. But blood trumps paper, Mr. Brennan. Any judge with sense will see that." "Then I guess we'll let a judge decide." Silas studied Colt for a long moment, and Eliza could see the gears turning behind those cold eyes. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Very well. I'll be in touch with my attorney. In the meantime, I'd like to see my nieces. Surely you won't deny me that." Colt didn't move. "Eliza can decide if she wants to see you." All eyes turned to the barn. Eliza stepped out slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Maisie appeared in the doorway of the house, clutching her doll, Evelyn's hand on her shoulder. Silas's face transformed into something that might have passed for warmth if you didn't look too closely. "Eliza, my dear girl, look how you've grown." Eliza said nothing. "And little Maisie." Silas took a step forward, and Evelyn's grip on Maisie's shoulder tightened. "I'm your Uncle Silas. I knew your papa when he was just a boy. We used to—" "My mother told me about you," Eliza said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "She said you only came around when you wanted something." Silas's smile froze. "Your mother was grieving and confused. She didn't understand. She said to stay away from you. She made me promise." Silence fell like a stone. Silas's mask slipped completely, his face hardening into something ugly. "That woman poisoned you against me. But I'm your blood, Eliza, not these people. Me, and I will have what's mine." "The girls aren't property," Evelyn said coldly. "And you're on our land. I suggest you leave before my husband makes you leave." Silas looked at Colt, who hadn't moved, his hand resting casually near the revolver at his hip. Something in his stillness must have convinced Silas, because the man took a step back toward his wagon. "This isn't over," he said. "I'll be back with a court order." We'll be waiting, Colt replied. They watched him drive away, the wagon disappearing down the road in a cloud of dust. When he was gone, Maisie started crying, and Evelyn pulled her inside. Eliza stood rooted to the spot, trembling. Colt walked over to her. You all right? He's going to take us away, isn't he? Not if I can help it. But he's family, the law. The law also recognizes guardianship and the best interests of the child. We'll fight this, Eliza. I promise you. Eliza looked up at him, this man who had opened his door to two dying girls, who had married a stranger to keep them safe, who now stood ready to fight for them again. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing this? Colt was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Because 4 years ago, I couldn't save my daughter. I was out mending fences when the fever took her. By the time I got back, she was gone. I told myself I'd never be that late again. Never stand by and watch someone die when I could do something about it. He met her eyes. You and Maisie knocked on my door half dead, and this time I wasn't late. I was right there, and I'll be damned if I let anyone take that away. That night, they gathered around the kitchen table after Maisie had finally cried herself to sleep. Evelyn poured coffee, her movements sharp with tension. He's going to court. You know that, don't you? I know, Colt said, and he'll argue blood rights. The law favors family. We're family now, too. On paper. For all of 3 weeks. Evelyn set down the pot harder than necessary. Colt, I agreed to this to save those girls from an orphanage. I didn't sign up for a legal battle with a man who clearly wants something. What do you think he wants? Eliza asked quietly. Evelyn and Colt exchanged a glance. It was Evelyn who answered. I did some asking around town after he left. Silas Hartley has debts, gambling debts from what I hear. And your father, what about him? He had a mining claim. Small thing, barely worth mentioning when he was alive. But there's been talk lately of a new vein being discovered in that area. If that claim's registered in your father's name, it would pass to you and Maisie as his heirs. Eliza felt cold. So he doesn't want us. He wants the claim. That would be my guess. Can he do that? Just take it? If he has legal custody, he'd control your inheritance until you come of age. Evelyn's voice was grim. Which means he could sell that claim and pocket the money, and you'd never see a penny. Then we can't let him win. Eliza's hands curled into fists on the table. We can't. Colt leaned forward. We won't. But we need to be smart about this. We need a lawyer, and we need evidence that Silas isn't fit to have custody. How do we get that? I know a man in Helena, name's Robert Finch. He's handled land disputes before. I'll ride out tomorrow and see if he'll take the case. Evelyn nodded slowly. And I'll start talking to people in town. If Silas has debts and a bad reputation, there'll be people who know about it. People who'll testify. Will that be enough? Eliza asked. It'll have to be, Colt said. Colt left before dawn the next morning. Eliza watched from the window as he saddled his horse, the sky still dark overhead. Evelyn came to stand beside her, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. He'll be gone 2 days, maybe 3, Evelyn said. Helena's a long ride. What if Silas comes back while he's gone? Then we deal with it. Evelyn's voice was firm. You and I and Maisie. We're not helpless, Eliza. Don't ever think we are. Eliza nodded, but her chest felt tight. She'd spent so much of her life feeling powerless, watching her father die, watching her mother waste away, walking barefoot down that burning road with her sister on her back. And just when she'd started to feel safe, Silas had appeared like a snake in the grass, ready to strike. I'm scared, she whispered. Evelyn put an arm around her shoulders. Good. That means you're paying attention, but being scared doesn't mean giving up. It means fighting harder. The days without Colt felt strange and empty. Evelyn kept them busy, cooking, cleaning, tending the animals. She taught Eliza how to churn butter and mend a torn seam and calculate prices for eggs at the market. Maisie followed them everywhere, quieter than usual, her doll clutched tight. On the second day, Evelyn took them into town. The store was busy, and people stared when they walked in. A woman and 2 girls without their man. Evelyn ignored the looks and went straight to work, gathering supplies and chatting with customers like nothing was wrong. But Eliza noticed the whispers. Notice the way Mrs. Patterson from the church leaned in to speak with Mrs. Cole, both of them glancing at Eliza and Maisie with poorly disguised curiosity. "I heard the uncle came by," Mrs. Patterson said, not quite quietly enough. "Said the girls rightfully belong with him." "Blood's blood," Mrs. Cole agreed. "Can't argue with that." Evelyn's hand stilled on the bolt of fabric she was measuring. She turned, her expression pleasant, but her eyes like ice. "Can I help you ladies with something?" Mrs. Patterson had the grace to look flustered. "Oh, Evelyn, we were just—" "Gossiping," Evelyn finished. "Yes, I heard. Let me save you some trouble. Those girls are under legal guardianship. Their uncle abandoned them when they needed him, and now he's circling back like a vulture. If you have opinions about that, you're welcome to share them with the judge. Otherwise, I suggest you mind your business." Mrs. Patterson's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Mrs. Cole flushed red and hurried toward the door, dragging her companion with her. When they were gone, Evelyn turned back to Eliza and winked. "Never let them see you sweat," she said. But not everyone in town was hostile. That afternoon, as they were loading supplies into the wagon, a man approached, older, with a weathered face and kind eyes. He tipped his hat to Evelyn. "Mrs. Brennan, name's Samuel Cross. I run the livery." "I know who you are, Mr. Cross. What can I do for you?" "I heard about Silas Hartley sniffing around. Wanted you to know, if you need someone to speak on your behalf, I'm willing." Evelyn's expression softened. "That's kind of you. But why?" "Because I knew Silas back when he was young. And I know he's no good. Cheated men at cards, borrowed money he never paid back, got run out of 2 towns that I know of. If he's after those girls, it ain't out of love. Would you testify to that in court?" "If it comes to it, yes, ma'am." "I would." Evelyn shook his hand. "Thank you, Mr. Cross. Truly." As they drove home, Eliza felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe they weren't as alone as she'd thought. Colt returned on the 3rd night, dusty and exhausted. He came through the door just as they were finishing supper, and Maisie leapt from her chair and ran to him. He caught her, lifting her easily, and something in his face relaxed. "Did you miss me, little one?" "Yes," Maisie said fiercely. "Don't go away again." "I'll try not to." He set her down and looked at Evelyn and Eliza. "We need to talk." They sent Maisie upstairs and gathered at the table. Colt pulled a folded paper from his coat and spread it out. "Robert Finch will take the case. He's good, and he's willing to travel here for the hearing, but he says we need to be prepared. Silas filed a petition for custody 2 days ago. The hearing's set for 3 weeks from now." Evelyn's jaw tightened. 3 weeks? That's not much time." "No, but Finch thinks we have a shot, especially if we can prove Silas's motives are financial and that he's unfit." "We have Mr. Cross," Eliza said, "and Evelyn's been asking around. There are others who'll talk." Colt nodded. "Good. We'll need them." Finch also said— He hesitated, glancing at Eliza. He said it would help if Eliza was willing to testify. Eliza's stomach dropped. "In court? In front of everyone?" "You don't have to," Evelyn said quickly. "We can—" "Yes," Eliza interrupted. "I'll do it." "I'll do it," she repeated, stronger this time. "If it'll help keep Maisie safe, I'll do whatever it takes." Colt studied her for a long moment, and something like pride flickered in his eyes. "All right," he said. "Then we fight." The next 3 weeks were a blur of preparation. Robert Finch arrived a week before the hearing, a sharp-eyed man in his 50s with a quick mind and a no-nonsense manner. He interviewed everyone— Colt, Evelyn, Eliza, even Maisie, though he kept his questions gentle. He took notes, asked follow-ups, and built a case piece by piece. Samuel Cross came by the ranch and told his story. So did Martha Green, who ran the boarding house in town and had once refused Silas a room because he'd trashed the last one and never paid. So did Daniel York, who'd lost $50 to Silas in a rigged card game. The picture that emerged was damning. Silas Hartley was a con man, a cheat, and a deadbeat who'd burned bridges across 3 territories. "It's not enough to prove he's a bad person," Finch warned. "We need to prove he's a bad guardian, that he's using these girls for financial gain." "How do we do that?" Colt asked. We put Eliza on the stand and let her tell the truth. If she can make the judge see that Silas doesn't care about them, that he's only after their inheritance, that'll carry weight. Eliza's hands shook every time she thought about it, but she nodded. I can do it. The night before the hearing, Eliza couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Maisie's soft breathing beside her. Tomorrow, everything would change. Either they'd be safe, or they'd be ripped away from the only home they'd known since their mother died. She thought about Silas's cold eyes, about standing in front of a judge in a room full of strangers, about what would happen if she failed. A soft knock came at the door. Eliza? Evelyn's voice, quiet. You awake? Yes. Evelyn slipped inside and sat on the edge of the bed. In the moonlight, her face looked softer, younger. I know you're scared, she said. I'm terrified. I would be too. But you're one of the bravest people I've ever met, Eliza. You walked 5 miles barefoot, carrying your sister to save her life. You stood up to Silas when he came here. And tomorrow, you're going to stand up to him again. And you're going to win. What if I don't? What if I say the wrong thing, or the judge doesn't believe me, or then we'll figure something else out. But I don't think that's going to happen. You know why? Why? Because you've got something Silas doesn't. You've got the truth. And the truth is powerful, Eliza. More powerful than money or blood or anything else he can throw at us. Evelyn reached out and squeezed her hand. You're not alone in this. Colt and I will be right there with you. And no matter what happens, we're not giving up. You understand? Eliza nodded, her throat tight. I understand. Good. Now try to get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day. The courthouse was packed. It seemed like half the town had turned out to watch, filling the wooden benches and spilling into the aisles. Eliza sat between Colt and Evelyn, Maisie on Evelyn's lap, her hands clenched so tight her knuckles were white. Silas sat on the other side of the room with his attorney, a sleek man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd been imported from back east. Silas caught Eliza's eye and smiled, and it took everything in her not to look away. The judge entered, a stern-faced woman in her 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes. She took her seat and banged the gavel. This court is now in session. We're here to determine custody of Eliza and Maisie Hartley. Mr. Brennan, you're currently serving as guardian. Is that correct? Colt stood. Yes, Your Honor. And Mr. Silas Hartley is petitioning for custody as the girl's uncle and closest living relative. Silas's attorney rose smoothly. That is correct, Your Honor. My client has a legal and moral right to care for his brother's children. He was unaware of their situation until recently, and upon learning of it, came immediately to claim them. Mr. Brennan, you have counsel? Robert Finch stood. Yes, Your Honor. Robert Finch, representing the Brennans. The judge nodded. Let's hear opening statements. For the next hour, Eliza listened as the attorneys laid out their cases. Silas's lawyer painted him as a grieving relative reunited with lost family, a man of means ready to provide for the girls. Finch countered with Colt and Evelyn's marriage, their stable home, their legal guardianship already approved by the county. Then came the witnesses. Silas's lawyer called a banker from Helena who testified that Silas had recently opened an account and deposited significant funds, proof, the lawyer argued, that he was financially stable. Finch cross-examined hard, getting the banker to admit the deposits had only been made in the last 2 weeks, conveniently timed with Silas's custody petition. Finch called Samuel Cross, who told the court about Silas's debts and deceptions. He called Martha Green and Daniel York, who corroborated the pattern of lies and theft. Silas's lawyer objected repeatedly, arguing irrelevance, but the judge allowed the testimony. Finally, Finch called Eliza. Her legs felt like water as she walked to the stand. The clerk swore her in, and she sat, her hands gripping the armrests, every eye in the room on her. Finch approached gently. Miss Hartley, can you tell the court how you came to live with Mr. and Mrs. Brennan? Eliza swallowed hard. Then she began to speak. She told them about the fever, about her mother dying in that hot cabin, about the walk down the dusty road with Maisie on her back, barefoot and starving, following smoke to a stranger's door. She told them about Colt opening that door, about the food and water and bed, about Evelyn agreeing to marry him to keep them safe. And she told them about Silas showing up weeks later, after the hard part was over, claiming family ties he'd never honored when it mattered. "Did your mother ever speak of your uncle?" Finch asked. "Yes," Eliza said quietly. "She told me to stay away from him. She said he only came around when he wanted something and that we should never trust him." "And do you trust him now?" "No." "Why not?" "Because he's not here for us. He's here for the mining claim, for the money." Silas's lawyer shot to his feet. "Objection! Speculation!" "It's not speculation," Eliza said, her voice rising. "He said it himself. He said, 'I will have what's mine.' Not 'I'll take care of you,' not 'I love you.' He said, 'What's mine?' Like we're things he owns." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge banged her gavel. "Order! Miss Hartley, please confine yourself to answering the questions asked." "I'm sorry, Your Honor," Eliza said. But she didn't feel sorry. She felt fierce. Finch nodded, satisfied. "No further questions." Silas's lawyer stood for cross-examination, his smile sharp. "Miss Hartley, isn't it true that you've only known Mr. and Mrs. Brennan for a matter of weeks?" "Yes." "And yet you claim to trust them more than your own blood relative?" "Yes." "Why should this court believe that a child of 10 years can make such a judgment?" Eliza met his eyes. "Because I'm the one who kept my sister alive when no one else would. I'm the one who walked 5 miles in the heat with no shoes. I'm the one who made the decisions that saved us. So yes, I think I can judge who's worth trusting." The lawyer's smile faltered. He asked a few more questions, trying to shake her, but Eliza held firm. When he finally dismissed her, she walked back to her seat on trembling legs. Colt gave her a small, proud nod. Evelyn squeezed her hand. The judge called a recess to consider the evidence. The wait felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. When the judge returned, her face was unreadable. Everyone stood. "I've reviewed the testimony and evidence presented today," she began. "This is not a simple case of family versus strangers. This is a case of determining what is genuinely in the best interests of these children." Eliza's heart pounded. Mr. Silas Hartley has presented himself as a concerned relative. However, the evidence suggests that his interest in the girls is primarily financial. The timing of his appearance, immediately following the discovery of a potentially valuable mining claim, is suspicious. Furthermore, multiple witnesses have testified to a pattern of dishonest behavior that calls into question his fitness as a guardian. Silas's face darkened. In contrast, Mr. and Mrs. Brennan, though newly married, have demonstrated genuine care and responsibility for these children. They provided shelter when it was desperately needed, formalized their guardianship through legal marriage, and have created a stable home environment. The judge looked directly at Eliza. Most importantly, the children themselves have made their wishes clear. Eliza Hartley is old enough to understand her situation, and her testimony was compelling and credible. She banged the gavel. Custody is awarded to Colt and Evelyn Brennan. The mining claim inheritance will be placed in trust for the girls until they reach majority age, to be administered by the Brennans as guardians. Mr. Silas Hartley's petition is denied. The courtroom exploded. Eliza felt Evelyn's arms around her, felt Colt's hand on her shoulder, felt Maisie's small body pressed against hers. Relief crashed over her like a wave, so intense it almost hurt. They'd won. Across the room, Silas stood frozen, his face twisted with rage. His lawyer was already gathering papers, preparing to leave. Silas's eyes found Eliza's, and for a moment she saw pure hatred there. Then he turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Eliza didn't care. Let him be angry. Let him rage. He'd lost, and they were free. Outside the courthouse, people congratulated them. Samuel Cross shook Colt's hand. Martha Green hugged Evelyn. Even some of the people who'd whispered and gossiped came forward with awkward apologies and well wishes. Robert Finch tipped his hat. "Well done, all of you. That was one of the most clear-cut rulings I've seen." "Thank you," Colt said. "We couldn't have done it without you." "No," Finch said, glancing at Eliza. "You couldn't have done it without her. That was some testimony, young lady." Eliza felt her cheeks warm. "I just told the truth." And that made all the difference. As they climbed into the wagon for the ride home, Maisie fell asleep against Evelyn's shoulder, exhausted. Eliza sat beside Colt, watching the landscape roll by. "It's really over?" she asked quietly. "It's really over," Colt confirmed. "What if he comes back?" "He won't. He's got no legal ground left to stand on, and even if he tried, we'd beat him again. Eliza nodded, but a small knot of worry remained in her chest. Men like Silas didn't give up easily. They just found new ways to take what they wanted. But for now, they were safe. For now, they were home. And that would have to be enough. The knot in Eliza's chest didn't loosen over the following days. It sat there like a stone, heavy and cold, even as life at the ranch settled back into its rhythm. She told herself she was being foolish. The judge had ruled. Silas had no legal claim. They were safe. But she'd seen his face when he'd stormed out of that courtroom. She'd seen the hatred burning in his eyes, and she knew men like him didn't walk away quietly. She kept her worries to herself, though. Colt had enough to handle with the ranch, and Evelyn was busy transforming the house from a bachelor's dwelling into something that felt like an actual home. Maisie had finally started sleeping through the night without nightmares. Eliza wasn't about to ruin that with her fears, so she worked. She helped Evelyn with the washing and the cooking. She fed the chickens and gathered eggs. She practiced her reading with the old primer Evelyn had found in town, sounding out words by lamplight while Maisie drew pictures on scraps of paper. 2 weeks after the hearing, the first snow came. Eliza woke to find the world transformed, everything blanketed in white that glittered in the early morning sun. Maisie pressed her nose against the window, breath fogging the glass. "It's beautiful," the little girl whispered. "It's cold," Evelyn said from the doorway, but she was smiling. "And it means winter is here for real. Come on, both of you. Breakfast first, then we've got work to do." They spent the morning preparing for the season ahead. Colt brought in extra firewood and stacked it by the stove. Evelyn checked the root cellar, taking inventory of their stores. Eliza helped pack straw around the foundation to keep the wind out, her fingers going numb despite her gloves. By afternoon, the ranch felt buttoned up and secure. They gathered in the kitchen, drinking hot cider Evelyn had spiced with cinnamon, and for the first time since the courthouse, Eliza felt something close to peace. Then the door opened, and Colt came in with a grim expression and a piece of paper in his hand. "What is it?" Evelyn asked, setting down her cup. Colt handed her the paper. "Found this nailed to the barn door." Evelyn read it, her face going pale. "That son of a—" "What does it say?" Eliza interrupted. Evelyn looked at her, then at Maisie, clearly weighing how much to share. Finally, she handed the paper to Eliza. The handwriting was sharp and angry, the message short. "You think a judge's ruling changes blood? Those girls are mine by right, and I'll have what I'm owed. This isn't over." There was no signature, but there didn't need to be. Eliza's hands started shaking. "He was here, on our property." "Probably came during the night," Colt said. His voice was calm, but his jaw was tight. "Cowards move, leaving threats in the dark." "What do we do?" Eliza asked. "We take it to the sheriff," Evelyn said immediately. "This is harassment, maybe even trespassing." "The sheriff won't do anything," Colt said. "Silas didn't sign it. There's no proof it came from him. And even if there was, it's just words on paper." "Words that threaten my children," Evelyn shot back, and something in Eliza's chest warmed at the possessiveness in her voice. "We can't just ignore this." "I'm not suggesting we ignore it. I'm saying we need to be smart." Colt looked at Eliza, then at Maisie, who was watching them with wide, frightened eyes. "We keep the doors locked. We don't go anywhere alone. And we watch for him." "You think he'll come back?" Eliza asked. "I think he's not done trying, but he's also not stupid. He knows if he gets caught on our property again, he'll be arrested. So he'll wait, he'll watch, and eventually he'll make a mistake." "And if he doesn't?" Evelyn's voice was sharp. "If he just keeps lurking out there making threats?" "Then we deal with it when it happens." Colt's gaze was steady. "But right now, the best thing we can do is stay calm and stay together." That night, Eliza lay awake listening to every creak and groan of the house. The wind rattled the windows. Branches scraped against the roof. Every sound made her heart jump. Beside her, Maisie whispered, "Liza, are you awake?" "Yes." "Is Uncle Silas going to take us away?" "No." Eliza pulled her sister close. "He's not. Mr. Brennan and Mrs. Brennan won't let that happen." "Promise?" Eliza thought about the note, about Silas's hatred, about all the ways the world could turn cruel without warning. But Maisie was 6 years old and terrified, and sometimes a lie wrapped in hope was kinder than the truth. I promise, she whispered. The days that followed were tense and watchful. Colt started carrying his rifle when he worked outside. Evelyn kept a shotgun by the kitchen door. They took turns checking the perimeter of the property each morning, looking for footprints or signs of disturbance. But there was nothing. No more notes. No sightings. It was as if Silas had vanished into the winter landscape. The waiting was almost worse than the threat itself. Then, 3 weeks after the note appeared, Samuel Cross rode out to the ranch with news. Silas Hartley left town, he said, standing in their kitchen and warming his hands on a cup of coffee. Took the stage to Helena yesterday morning. Colt leaned against the counter. You're sure? Saw him myself, had 2 bags with him, looked like he was planning to stay gone a while. Evelyn exchanged a glance with Colt. Could be a trick. Could be he wants us to think he's gone so we let our guard down. Could be, Samuel agreed. But I also heard he's been asking around Helena about selling mining equipment. Maybe he's moving on to some other scheme. Or maybe he's planning something bigger, Colt said quietly. Samuel shrugged. Either way, thought you should know. Keep your eyes open, but don't lose sleep over it. Man like Silas tends to show his hand eventually. After he left, the house felt quieter, but no less tense. Eliza wanted to believe Silas was really gone, that the threat had passed, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was out there somewhere, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Winter deepened. Snow piled high against the fences. The days grew short and the nights long. Inside the ranch house, a different kind of transformation was taking place. Evelyn had stopped sleeping in the downstairs guest room. Nobody talked about it, but one morning Eliza noticed Evelyn's things had migrated upstairs to Colt's room. The door stayed closed at night now, and in the mornings, there was a softness to the way they moved around each other that hadn't been there before. Maisie noticed too. Are Mr. Brennan and Mrs. Brennan really married now? She asked one afternoon while they were making bread. Evelyn's hand stilled in the dough. What do you mean, really married? I mean, you know, like Mama and Papa were, before. Evelyn was quiet for a moment, and Eliza saw color rise in her cheeks. We're figuring it out, sweetheart. It started as an arrangement to keep you girls safe, but somewhere along the way, it became more. Do you love him? Maisie asked with the blunt curiosity of a child. Evelyn smiled, small and private. I'm getting there. And it was true. Eliza could see it in the little things. The way Evelyn touched Colt's shoulder when she passed him. The way Colt's eyes followed her across a room. The quiet conversations they had in the evenings after the girls had gone to bed, their voices a low murmur through the floorboards. It made Eliza feel something complicated. Relief, because it meant they were becoming a real family. Sadness, because it reminded her of her parents, of what had been lost. And hope, because maybe broken things could be mended after all. Christmas came quietly. They didn't have money for extravagant gifts, but Evelyn baked cookies and Colt carved small wooden animals for Maisie. Eliza received a new dress that Evelyn had sewn in secret, deep blue with buttons that matched her eyes. It's beautiful, Eliza breathed, running her fingers over the fabric. You needed something nice, Evelyn said. Something that's just yours. They ate roast chicken and potatoes by lamplight, and Maisie laughed so hard she snorted when Colt told a story about a cow that had once chased him into a tree. For a few hours, the shadow of Silas felt very far away. But that night, lying in bed, Eliza heard Evelyn and Colt talking downstairs. We can't keep living like this, Evelyn was saying, jumping at every sound, checking over our shoulders. The girls deserve better. I know, Colt replied. But what else can we do? We can't make him disappear. Maybe we can. Maybe if we found proof of what he's really after, we could get a restraining order, keep him legally barred from coming near us. Proof of what? That he wants their inheritance? We already established that in court. No, proof that he's dangerous, proof that he's planning something. There was a pause. I've been thinking, what if I went to Helena, asked around about him, found people who know what he's been up to? That's too risky. If he's there and sees you, he won't. I'll be careful, and you'll be here with the girls. They'll be safe. Evelyn, Colt, we can't live in fear forever. Sooner or later, we have to take action. Colt was quiet for a long time. Then, all right, but you take someone with you. Samuel, maybe. Someone who can watch your back. Agreed. Eliza pulled the blanket over her head, her heart racing. Evelyn was going to Helena, going to confront Silas's world head on. The thought terrified her, but it also filled her with a fierce kind of pride. Evelyn wasn't just a woman who'd married Colt out of convenience anymore. She was their protector, their fighter, their mother, in all the ways that mattered. Evelyn left 2 days after Christmas, with Samuel Cross riding alongside her. She kissed Maisie goodbye, hugged Eliza tight, and touched Colt's face with a tenderness that made Eliza look away. "Be back in 3 days," Evelyn promised. 4 at most. "Be careful," Colt said. "Always am." They watched her ride away, the wagon disappearing into the white landscape. Maisie clutched Eliza's hand, and Colt stood with his arms crossed, his face unreadable. "She'll be all right," he said, as much to himself as to them. "She's tougher than she looks." The house felt empty without her. Colt tried to keep things normal, cooking meals and maintaining routines, but there was a tension in him that the girls could feel. He checked the windows more often, kept his rifle close, barely slept. On the second night, Eliza found him sitting at the kitchen table long after midnight, staring at nothing. "You should rest," she said quietly. He looked up, startled. "You should be in bed." "Couldn't sleep." She sat down across from him. "You're worried about her." "Yes. She'll be all right. You said so yourself." "I know what I said." He rubbed his face. But knowing something and believing it are different things. Eliza understood that better than most. "Do you love her?" Colt's hands stilled. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something raw and honest in his eyes. "Yes," he said simply. "I didn't expect to. Didn't plan on it. But yes." "Does she know?" "I don't know. Maybe." He smiled faintly. "We're both pretty good at not saying what we feel. You should tell her. When she gets back." "Maybe I will." He tilted his head. "You're awfully wise for 10 years old, you know that?" "I've had to be." Colt's expression softened. "Yeah, you have, and I'm sorry for that." "Don't be. It brought us here." Eliza looked around the kitchen at the home they'd built. "And here's not so bad." "No," Colt agreed. "It's not." The third day came and went with no sign of Evelyn. Colt tried to hide his worry, but Eliza could see it in the way he paced, the way he kept walking to the window and staring at the empty road. On the fourth day, as dusk was falling, they finally heard the sound of wagon wheels. Colt was out the door before it fully stopped. Evelyn climbed down slowly, looking exhausted, and he caught her in his arms. She leaned into him for just a moment before pulling back, her expression grim. "I found something," she said. They gathered in the kitchen. Samuel Cross stayed for the telling, his face serious. Evelyn spread papers on the table, receipts, correspondence, a ledger book. "Silas has been busy," she began. "He's been trying to sell shares in the mining claim, telling investors it's already producing, showing them forged assay reports. He's raised nearly $3,000 on promises alone." Colt's jaw tightened. "That's fraud." "It gets worse. One of the investors got suspicious and hired someone to check the claim itself. Turns out there's no active mining happening. The whole thing's a con. And when Silas found out the investor was asking questions, he threatened him, explicitly, in writing." She pulled out a letter, and Eliza saw Silas's handwriting, sharp and angry. The words were ugly, promising violence if the investor didn't back off. "This is proof," Samuel said. "Proof he's dangerous and a criminal. You take this to the law, they'll issue a warrant." "Already did," Evelyn said. "Sheriff in Helena's drawing up papers now. Within a week, Silas Hartley will be wanted for fraud and criminal threats." Colt stared at the papers, something like awe in his expression. "How did you find all this?" Evelyn smiled tiredly. "I asked questions, bought drinks for the right people, convinced a clerk to let me see some records. Turns out, when you're trying to run a con, you leave a trail." "You're incredible," Colt said quietly. "I'm thorough." But her cheeks colored. "And I'm exhausted. Is there coffee?" Eliza was already pouring her a cup. Evelyn took it gratefully, wrapping her hands around the warmth. "What happens now?" Eliza asked. "Now we wait for the warrant to be served," Evelyn said. "And once it is, Silas will be arrested. He'll be locked up awaiting trial. And even if he somehow gets out, he won't be able to come near us without violating the restraining order I also filed. It's over? Maisie's voice was small, hopeful. It's over, Evelyn confirmed. She reached out and smoothed Maisie's hair. You're safe, sweetheart, both of you. The relief was almost overwhelming. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. She wouldn't cry. Not now, when they'd finally won. But when Evelyn pulled her into a hug, the tears came anyway. She cried for her mother, for her father, for all the fear and uncertainty of the past months. And she cried because for the first time since that burning road, she felt truly safe. Samuel left after supper, tipping his hat and promising to let them know when he heard word of the arrest. The four of them sat around the table as darkness fell outside, the lamplight warm and golden. I have something for you, Colt said suddenly. He stood and crossed to a shelf, pulling down a small wooden box. He set it in front of Eliza and Maisie. Open it. Eliza lifted the lid. Inside were 2 silver lockets on delicate chains. They were my daughter's, Colt said quietly. She would have wanted you to have them. Eliza's throat tightened. She lifted one out, the metal cool against her palm. Inside was a tiny, perfect photograph of a little girl with dark hair and Colt's eyes. That's Grace, Colt said. She was 7 when she died. Would have been 11 now, about your age, Eliza. We can't take these, Eliza whispered. Yes, you can. You're part of this family now, and family shares what they have. Maisie was already putting hers on, the locket hanging just above her heart. Eliza fastened hers with shaking fingers, feeling the weight of it settle against her chest. Thank you, she managed. Colt nodded. Then he turned to Evelyn. I have something for you too. He pulled a small box from his pocket and set it on the table. Evelyn opened it slowly, and her breath caught. Inside was a ring, not the plain band he'd given her at the courthouse, but something finer, a thin gold circle with a small, perfect diamond. I know we started this as an arrangement, Colt said, but it's not that anymore. Not for me. And if you're willing, I'd like to make it real. Not because we have to, but because I want to. Because I... He stopped, took a breath. Because I love you, Evelyn, and I want you to stay. Not as a convenience, but as my wife. For real this time. The kitchen was utterly silent. Evelyn stared at the ring, her eyes shining. When she looked up at Colt, her smile was tremulous and beautiful. You stubborn, impossible man, she whispered. I've been waiting for you to say that for weeks. She held out her hand and Colt slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he kissed her, gentle and sure, and Maisie giggled while Eliza looked away, smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. When they pulled apart, Evelyn was crying. I love you too, she said. In case that wasn't clear. It's clear now, Colt replied. They ate dessert, dried apple pie that Evelyn had made before leaving for Helena, and talked about small things, plans for spring planting, whether to get a dog, what color to paint the shutters, normal things, family things. Eliza listened to it all, feeling something settle into place inside her. This was what she'd been searching for on that burning road. Not just safety, not just shelter. This, a table full of people who cared, laughter and warmth and belonging. Home. Later, as she and Maisie were getting ready for bed, Maisie said, Liza, do you think Mama would be happy about us being here? Eliza thought about her mother, about the woman who'd worked herself to death trying to keep them fed, about her last whispered words. Take care of your sister. Yes, she said. I think she'd be very happy. The week passed in a haze of normalcy that felt almost surreal. They fell into easy rhythms, work and meals and evenings by the fire. The threat of Silas faded into background noise, something they were still aware of but no longer consumed by. Then, on a cold January morning, Samuel Cross arrived with news. They got him, he said without preamble. Sheriff in Helena arrested Silas 3 days ago. He's in custody awaiting trial. Tried to run when they came for him, which didn't help his case any. Evelyn sagged against the counter. Thank heaven. There's more. The investors he defrauded are pressing charges too. He's looking at years in prison, even if he gets a sympathetic jury. Which he won't, Colt said. Which he won't, Samuel agreed. Man burned too many bridges. He'll be lucky if they don't throw away the key. When Samuel left, Eliza felt like she could breathe properly for the first time in months. It was really, truly over. Silas couldn't hurt them anymore. Couldn't threaten them or lurk in the shadows. He was locked away, powerless. They were free. That night, Colt built a fire in the hearth that blazed bright and warm. They sat around it, Colt and Evelyn on the settee, Eliza and Maisie on the rug, and watched the flames dance. "I've been thinking," Colt said eventually. "We should make this official, legal adoption papers. Make you girls Brennans in name as well as fact." Eliza's heart jumped. "You mean it?" "Of course I mean it. You're our daughters. Might as well make it legal." Maisie launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Can I call you Papa?" Colt's voice was rough. "I'd like that." "And me Mama?" Maisie looked at Evelyn. Evelyn smiled through tears. "I'd like that too." Eliza didn't throw herself at anyone, but she met Colt's eyes across the firelight and nodded, and something passed between them. Understanding, acceptance, gratitude. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." "Thank you," Colt replied, for knocking on my door." Later, as Eliza lay in bed with Maisie already asleep beside her, she thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. The fever, the road, the desperate knock on a stranger's door, the marriage of convenience that had become something real, the fight to stay together. It had been hard, terrifying even, but they'd made it through. And tomorrow they'd wake up as a family. Not by blood, but by choice. And that, Eliza thought as sleep finally claimed her, was the truest kind of family there was. Spring came slowly to Montana, the snow melting in grudging patches that revealed brown earth and the first brave shoots of green. Eliza stood on the porch watching the world wake up, feeling something similar happening inside herself. The fear that had lived in her chest for so long was finally loosening its grip, replaced by something lighter, something that felt almost like joy. Behind her, the screen door creaked open and Evelyn appeared with 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Eliza, steam curling in the cool morning air. "You're up early," Evelyn said. "Couldn't sleep. Too much to think about." "The adoption papers?" Eliza nodded. The legal documents had arrived yesterday, official and binding. Eliza Brennan, Maisie Brennan. Their new names felt strange and wonderful at the same time, like new shoes that hadn't been broken in yet. "How does it feel?" Evelyn asked. "Like I can finally breathe," Eliza said honestly. "Like we're not just surviving anymore. We're actually living." Evelyn smiled and put her arm around Eliza's shoulders. They stood like that for a while, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. In the distance, Colt was already working, fixing a section of fence that had sagged under the winter snow. Maisie was still asleep upstairs, her soft snores audible through the open window. "I never thought I'd have this," Evelyn said quietly. "A family. I'd convinced myself I was fine alone, that I didn't need anyone. What changed? 2 half-dead girls knocked on a door and a stubborn man decided to marry me." Evelyn laughed softly. "Turns out I was wrong about not needing anyone. I just needed the right people." Eliza leaned into her, feeling the warmth and solidity of this woman who'd chosen them. "I'm glad you said yes. That day in the store." "So am I." They finished their coffee in comfortable silence, then Evelyn headed inside to start breakfast. Eliza stayed on the porch a moment longer, savoring the peace. For the first time in her life, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a promise. The weeks that followed were filled with the kind of work that comes with a working ranch in spring. The cattle needed tending, the garden needed planting, and there were 1,000 small repairs that winter had made necessary. Eliza threw herself into it all, learning to handle a plow and memorizing which seeds went where in the garden rows. Maisie was too small for heavy labor, but she helped where she could, filling water buckets and pulling weeds with fierce determination. One afternoon, while Eliza was helping Colt replace rotten boards in the barn, he said, "You're good at this. The work, I mean." "I like it," Eliza admitted. "Mama used to say I had restless hands, always needed to be doing something." "Nothing wrong with that." Colt hammered in a nail with practiced efficiency. "But you know you don't have to work yourself to exhaustion, right? You're allowed to just be a kid sometimes." Eliza paused, considering. I don't really know how to do that. Colt's expression softened. Then maybe it's time you learned. That evening, after supper, he pulled out a worn deck of cards and taught her and Maisie how to play rummy. They sat around the kitchen table laughing as Maisie tried to hide her cards and kept accidentally showing them to everyone. Evelyn won 3 games in a row, crowing with delight each time, and Colt accused her of cheating in a way that was clearly affectionate. It was such a simple thing, just a card game. But to Eliza, it felt revolutionary. This was what families did. They played games and teased each other and laughed over nothing in particular. They weren't just surviving together. They were enjoying each other. When Maisie finally fell asleep at the table, her head pillowed on her arms, Colt carried her upstairs. Eliza started to follow, but Evelyn stopped her. "Stay a minute," she said. "I want to talk to you." Eliza sat back down, suddenly nervous. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart, nothing like that." Evelyn poured them both water from the pitcher. "I've been thinking about your education. You're a bright girl, and you deserve more than just what I can teach you here at home." "You mean school?" "Yes, there's a schoolhouse in Coldwater. The teacher, Miss Caroline Winters, is a friend of mine. I spoke to her yesterday, and she'd be happy to have you and Maisie join her class." Eliza's stomach twisted. She'd never been to a real school before. Her mother had taught her to read and do basic arithmetic, but that was all. The thought of walking into a room full of strange children who'd known each other for years was terrifying. "I don't know if I can," she said quietly. "Why not?" "What if they don't like me? What if I'm too far behind? What if they're lucky to have you?" Evelyn interrupted gently. "Eliza, I know you've learned to expect the worst from people, but not everyone is like Silas. Not everyone is cruel. Some people are kind. Some people are good, and you deserve a chance to meet them." Eliza wanted to believe her, but fear was a hard habit to break. "What if I try it and it's awful?" she asked. "Then you come home and we figure something else out. But you have to try first, otherwise you'll never know what you might be missing." Eliza thought about it for a long moment. Then she nodded. "All right, I'll try." Evelyn smiled. "That's my girl." The following Monday, Eliza and Maisie walked into the Coldwater schoolhouse for the first time. It was a simple one-room building with wooden benches and a blackboard at the front. About 20 children ranging from 6 to 14 sat scattered throughout the room, all turning to stare when the door opened. Miss Winters, a young woman with auburn hair and a kind face, stood from her desk and came forward. "You must be Eliza and Maisie," she said warmly. "Welcome. We're so glad to have you." She introduced them to the class, and Eliza felt every eye on her, measuring, judging. She kept her chin up and her expression neutral, the way she'd learned to do when facing down Silas in court. Miss Winters assigned Maisie to sit with the younger children and placed Eliza with a group of girls her own age. One of them, a blonde girl with a smattering of freckles, leaned over. "I'm Sarah," she whispered. "That's Emma, and that's Ruth. Don't worry, Miss Winters is nice. She hardly ever uses the switch." Eliza didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded. The morning passed in a blur of lessons. Arithmetic, which Eliza found easy. Reading, which she enjoyed. History, which was new and fascinating. At lunch, the children scattered outside to eat the meals they'd brought from home. Evelyn had packed Eliza and Maisie generous portions of bread and cheese and apples, and Eliza found a spot under a tree to eat. Sarah plopped down beside her without asking, Emma and Ruth following. So you're the girls living with Colt Brennan now, right?" "Yes," Eliza said carefully. "Everyone was talking about it when you first came to town. About how you just showed up out of nowhere and he married Evelyn Shaw to keep you." Eliza stiffened, waiting for the judgment, but Sarah just grinned. "I think it's romantic, like a storybook. A mysterious stranger saving orphan girls and falling in love." Emma nodded enthusiastically. "My ma says Evelyn's the smartest woman in town, and Colt's lucky to have her." "My pa says they make a good pair," Ruth added. "Says it takes strong people to build a family from scratch." Eliza felt something loosen in her chest. These girls weren't mocking her or pitying her. They were just talking, being friendly. "It's not really like a storybook," she said slowly. "It's been hard, really hard, but yes, we're lucky to have them." "Do you like living on the ranch?" Sarah asked. "I do. It's a lot of work, but it's good work." "Better than living in town, I bet," Emma said. I'd love to have all that space to run around in. My house is so small, I'm practically sleeping on top of my brothers. They laughed, and Eliza found herself laughing too. It felt strange and wonderful at the same time, this casual friendship. She'd been so focused on survival for so long that she'd forgotten what it was like to just be a girl among other girls. Over the following weeks, school became something Eliza actually looked forward to. She discovered she had a talent for numbers and a love of geography. Miss Winters lent her books to take home, and she devoured them by lamplight, reading about places she'd never seen and people she'd never meet. Maisie thrived too, making friends with the younger children and learning her letters with fierce concentration. She came home each day chattering about what she'd learned, what games they'd played at recess, who'd said what to whom. "She's happy," Evelyn observed one evening as they watched Maisie draw pictures at the table. "Really, truly happy." "So am I," Eliza admitted. Colt looked up from the saddle he was repairing. "Good. That's how it should be." But even as life settled into this new, better rhythm, there were still moments when the past crept in uninvited. One night, Eliza woke from a nightmare about the cabin, about her mother's still body and the flies gathering at the window. She sat up gasping, her heart racing. Evelyn appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl. "I heard you cry out. Bad dream?" Eliza nodded, not trusting her voice. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed and stroked her hair the way Eliza's mother used to. "Want to talk about it?" "It was about Mama, about the day she died." "Those memories don't just go away," Evelyn said gently. "They get easier to carry, but they don't disappear, and that's all right. Your mother was important. She deserves to be remembered." "I'm scared I'll forget her," Eliza whispered. "I'm so happy here, and sometimes whole days go by where I don't think about her at all, and then I feel guilty." "Oh, sweetheart," Evelyn pulled her close. "Being happy doesn't mean forgetting. It means honoring what she wanted for you. She wanted you to live, Eliza, not just survive, but really live. And that's exactly what you're doing. You think she'd be proud of me?" "I know she would be." Eliza cried then, letting out grief she'd been holding for months. Evelyn held her through it, rocking her gently, and when the tears finally stopped, Eliza felt lighter, cleaner. "Thank you," she whispered. "Any time," Evelyn replied. Spring deepened into early summer. One Saturday, Colt announced he was taking his first solo flight. The plane was a Cessna, and he was flying over the ranch. The cattle were grazing, and the sun was setting. Colt felt a sense of freedom and adventure. He was flying high, and the world below was a blur of green and brown. He was flying over the ranch, and the cattle were grazing. The sun was setting, and the sky was turning pink. Colt felt a sense of freedom and adventure. He was flying high, and the world below was a blur of green and brown. He was flying over the ranch, and the cattle were grazing. The sun was setting, and the sky was turning pink. Colt felt a sense of freedom and adventure. He was flying high, and the world below was a blur of green and brown. He was flying over the ranch, and the cattle were grazing. The sun was setting, and the sky was turning pink. Colt felt a sense of freedom and adventure. He was flying high, and the world below was a blur of green and brown. He was flying over the ranch, and the cattle were grazing. The sun was setting, and the sky was turning pink. Colt felt a sense of freedom and adventure. He was flying high, and the world below was a blur of green and brown. He was flying over the ranch, and the cattle were grazing. The sun was setting, and the sky was turning pink. Colt felt a sense of freedom and adventure. He was flying high, and the world below was a blur of green and brown. He was flying over the ranch, and the cattle were grazing. The sun was setting, and the sky was turning pink. Colt felt a sense of freedom and adventure. He was flying high, and the world below was a blur of green and brown. He was flying over the ranch, and the cattle were grazing. The sun was setting, and the sky was turning pink. Colt felt a sense of freedom and adventure. He was flying high, and the world below was a blur of green and brown. He was flying over the ranch, and the cattle were grazing. The sun was setting, and the sky was turning pink. Colt felt a sense of freedom and adventure. He was flying high, and the world below was a blur of green and brown. He was flying over the ranch, and the cattle were grazing. The sun was setting, and the sky was turning pink. Colt felt a sense of freedom and adventure. He was flying high, and the world below was a blur of green and brown. He was flying over the ranch, and the cattle were grazing. The sun was setting, and the sky was turning pink. Colt felt a sense of freedom and adventure. He was flying high, and the world below was a blur of green and brown. He was flying over the ranch, and the cattle were grazing. The sun was setting, and the sky was. One Saturday, Colt announced he was taking them all into town for the Founders' Day celebration. Eliza had heard about it at school, a whole day of games and music and food, the town's way of celebrating its establishment 20 years prior. They dressed in their best clothes and rode into Coldwater in the wagon. The main street was transformed, decorated with bunting and flags. Tables lined the sidewalks, laden with pies and cakes. A small band played lively music on a makeshift stage. Children ran everywhere, shrieking with delight. Maisie's eyes went wide. "Can we play the games?" "That's what we're here for," Colt said, lifting her down from the wagon. They spent the afternoon trying their luck at various contests. Eliza discovered she was surprisingly good at the ring toss, winning a small ribbon. Maisie ate so much candy she made herself sick, and Evelyn had to sit with her in the shade while she recovered. Colt entered the axe-throwing competition and came in second, which he grumbled about good-naturedly. Sarah found Eliza near the pie table and dragged her over to a group of girls playing hopscotch. Eliza joined in, laughing and competitive, and when she finally stopped to catch her breath, she looked around and realized something. She belonged here. These people knew her story, and they'd accepted her anyway. As evening fell, the band started playing dancing music. Couples gathered in the street, moving to the rhythm. Colt bowed dramatically to Evelyn and held out his hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Brennan?" Evelyn laughed. "You may, Mr. Brennan." They swept into the crowd, and Eliza watched them move together with an ease that spoke of growing comfort and deepening affection. They looked happy. They looked right. "Your parents are sweet together," Sarah said, appearing at Eliza's elbow. Eliza started to correct her. "They're not really my parents. We're just—" But then she stopped, because they were her parents. Maybe not by blood, but by choice. By love. By every moment they'd chosen to fight for her and Maisie. "Yes," she said instead. "They are." A boy Eliza vaguely recognized from school approached nervously. Would you like to dance?" Eliza blinked, startled. She'd never danced with a boy before, didn't really know how, but Sarah was grinning and nudging her forward, and the boy looked so hopeful and terrified that she couldn't say no. "All right," she said. He led her into the crowd, and they moved awkwardly to the music, stepping on each other's feet and laughing. It was clumsy and embarrassing and absolutely wonderful. When the song ended, Eliza curtsied the way she'd seen other girls do, and the boy bowed, his face red. "Thank you," he mumbled before hurrying away. Sarah materialized immediately. "Thomas Miller just danced with you. He's been sweet on you for weeks." "He has not." "Has too. Emma and I have been watching. He stares at you during arithmetic." Eliza felt her own face heat. "Well, I don't stare at him." "Not yet," Sarah said with a knowing grin. They dissolved into giggles, and Eliza felt something she hadn't felt in years. Normal. Just a regular girl being teased about boys and dancing and silly things. Not an orphan, not a survivor. Just Eliza. As they drove home that night, Maisie fell asleep against Evelyn's shoulder, exhausted and sugar-sick. Eliza sat in the back of the wagon, watching the stars come out one by one. "Good day?" Colt asked, glancing back at her. "Best day," Eliza said. She meant it. For the first time since her mother died, she'd felt something other than grief or fear or determination. She'd felt joy, pure, uncomplicated joy. The summer passed in a golden haze of long days and warm nights. Eliza and Maisie helped with the haying, learning to stack it just right so it wouldn't mold. They went swimming in the creek when the heat grew unbearable, shrieking at the cold water. They picked wild berries and came home with stained fingers and full baskets. Evelyn taught Eliza to sew properly, and together they made new curtains for the kitchen. Colt showed her how to handle a horse, how to read its moods and earn its trust. Maisie followed them everywhere like a devoted shadow, soaking up knowledge and affection in equal measure. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Evelyn said, "I've been thinking about expanding the garden next year. Maybe planting some fruit trees. Apple trees? Maisie asked hopefully. Apple, pear, maybe cherry. It'll take a few years before they produce, but it'll be worth it. A few years, Colt repeated thoughtfully. You planning to be here a few years from now? Evelyn looked at him, her expression soft. I'm planning to be here as long as you'll have me. Then I guess we're planting fruit trees. They smiled at each other, and Eliza felt a swell of contentment. This was permanence. This was building something that would last. But not everything was easy. One afternoon in late July, Eliza was helping Evelyn hang laundry when a stranger rode up to the ranch. He was young, maybe 20, with a nervous energy about him. I'm looking for Colt Brennan, he said. Colt came out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. That's me. I've got a message from Helena about Silas Hartley. Eliza's stomach dropped. She moved closer, close enough to hear. The young man shifted uncomfortably. Trial was last week. He was convicted on all counts. They sentenced him to 8 years hard labor. Relief swept through Eliza so intensely it made her dizzy. 8 years. By the time Silas got out, she'd be 18, an adult, beyond his reach forever. There's something else, the messenger continued. He tried to escape during transport, got into a fight with the guards. He's alive, but he's in isolation now. Won't be getting out anytime soon, even with good behavior. Colt's expression was grim. Thank you for bringing word. The messenger tipped his hat and rode away. Colt turned to find Eliza standing there, her hand pressed to her mouth. You heard, he said. She nodded, unable to speak. It's over now, Colt said firmly. Truly over. He can't hurt you anymore. I know. Eliza's voice came out shaky. I didn't realize how much I was still waiting for the other shoe to drop. Even when we were happy, part of me was always braced for him to come back. Evelyn came over and put her arms around both of them. Well, he's not coming back, and we can finally stop looking over our shoulders. That night, they had a quiet celebration. Nothing big or dramatic, just the four of them sharing a special meal and talking about the future without the shadow of Silas hanging over it. Maisie asked if they could get a dog, and Colt actually agreed to think about it, which sent her into raptures. As Eliza lay in bed that night, she realized something profound. For the first time since her father died, she wasn't afraid of tomorrow. She was looking forward to it. August brought the county fair, and Evelyn insisted on entering some of her preserves in the competition. She spent days perfecting her recipes, filling the kitchen with the scent of cooking fruit and sugar. Eliza helped measure and stir, learning the precise alchemy of turning summer's bounty into jars of jewel-bright jam. When they took Evelyn's entries to the fair, Eliza was stunned by the crowds. People from all over the county had gathered, showing off livestock and crafts and produce. There were races and demonstrations and more food than she'd ever seen in one place. Evelyn's strawberry jam won second place, and her pickled vegetables took first. She accepted her ribbons with pleasure, and Colt kissed her right there in front of everyone, not caring who saw. Later, as they wandered through the displays, Eliza found herself standing in front of a booth showing embroidered samplers. One of them caught her eye, a simple design of a house with a family of 4 standing in front of it. Below it, someone had stitched the words, "Home is where love is." You like that? Evelyn asked, appearing beside her. It's nice, Eliza said. I could teach you to embroider. You've got steady hands for it. Really? Really. We could make one for our house. Something special just for us. The idea pleased Eliza more than she could say. Something permanent. Something that would hang on their wall and mark this place as theirs. I'd like that, she said. They bought supplies that day, and over the following weeks, Evelyn taught Eliza the basic stitches. They sat together in the evenings working on a sampler that showed the ranch house with 4 figures, 2 tall, 2 small. Maisie wanted to help too, so Evelyn gave her a simple pattern to practice on. It was painstaking work, each tiny stitch requiring patience and precision. But Eliza found it soothing, almost meditative. As the design slowly took shape, she felt like she was stitching together more than just thread and fabric. She was stitching together a family, a home, a future. One evening, as the summer heat finally started to break, Colt came in from the fields looking thoughtful. I've been thinking, he said. We should take a photograph. A family photograph. Evelyn looked up from her sewing. That's a wonderful idea. There's a photographer sets up in town once a month. We could go next week, get a proper portrait done. Maisie bounced in her seat. Can I wear my blue dress? You can wear whatever you want, Colt said. The following week, they dressed in their finest clothes and rode into town. The photographer had set up a temporary studio in a room behind the general store, complete with painted backdrop and carefully arranged lights. Family of 4? He asked, studying them with a professional eye. Yes, Colt said firmly. They arranged themselves in front of the camera, Colt and Evelyn seated, Eliza and Maisie standing behind them. The photographer fussed with the positioning, adjusting angles and smoothing fabric. Now hold very still, he instructed. Don't move a muscle. The camera clicked, capturing them in that moment. When they returned a week later to collect the finished photograph, Eliza stared at it in wonder. There they were, frozen in time. A family, real and undeniable. Evelyn had it framed, and they hung it in the parlor where everyone could see it. Eliza passed it a dozen times a day, and each time she felt a surge of pride and belonging. This was her family, not by accident or necessity, but by choice, by love. As September arrived and the weather began to cool, Eliza stood in the garden helping Evelyn harvest the last of the tomatoes. School would start again soon, and she found herself actually excited about it. About seeing Sarah and Emma and Ruth. About learning new things. About being part of a community. You're smiling, Evelyn observed. I was just thinking, Eliza said, about how different everything is now. How different I am. How so? A year ago, I was just trying to survive, trying to keep Maisie alive one more day, and now... She looked around at the ranch, at the house, at Evelyn beside her. Now I'm living, really living, and it's wonderful. Evelyn set down her basket and pulled Eliza into a hug. You deserve every bit of it, sweetheart, every single bit. That night, after supper, Eliza finished the sampler. She held it up for everyone to see. The house, the family, the carefully stitched words beneath. The Brennan family, 1882. It's perfect, Maisie breathed. Colt took it carefully, studying the tiny, precise stitches. This must have taken you weeks. It did, Eliza said, but it was worth it. They hung it next to the photograph, and Eliza stepped back to admire the display. 2 pieces of evidence that this family was real, that they existed, that they mattered. She thought about that burning road, about the desperate knock on a stranger's door. She thought about every hard choice and scary moment that had led them here, and she was grateful. Grateful for every single step, because they'd all been necessary. They'd all led to this, to home. Autumn arrived with a crispness that made everything feel sharper, clearer. The leaves on the cottonwoods turned gold, and the air carried the scent of wood smoke and coming frost. Eliza walked to school each morning with Maisie, their breath making small clouds in the cold, and she found herself noticing things she'd never had time to notice before. The way sunlight caught on spiderwebs, the sound of geese flying south in ragged V formations, the particular shade of blue the sky turned just before sunset. She was learning to pay attention to beauty instead of just danger, learning to live instead of just survive. One afternoon in late October, Miss Winters kept Eliza after class. The other students filed out, Maisie included, and Eliza felt a flutter of nervousness. Had she done something wrong? But Miss Winters was smiling. I wanted to talk to you about your progress, she said, gesturing for Eliza to sit. You've been with us for half a year now, and I'm impressed. You're working at a level well beyond your age. I like learning, Eliza said simply. It shows. I've been thinking, have you ever considered becoming a teacher yourself? When you're older, I mean. The question caught Eliza completely off guard. A teacher? Me? Why not? You're bright, patient with the younger children, and you have a natural way of explaining things. The territory needs good teachers, Eliza. Women who understand what it means to fight for an education. Eliza had never thought about her future in such concrete terms. She'd been so focused on just getting through each day that the idea of choosing a profession, a path, seemed impossibly distant. I don't know, she said slowly. I've never thought about it. Well, think about it now, Miss Winters said kindly. You have time. But I wanted you to know that I see potential in you, real potential. Don't waste it. Eliza walked home in a daze, Miss Winter's words echoing in her head. A teacher. Someone who helped other children learn and grow. Someone who made a difference. The idea took root in her mind, small but persistent. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, she mentioned it hesitantly. Miss Winters said I should think about becoming a teacher someday. Evelyn's face lit up. That's wonderful. You'd be excellent at it. You really think so? I know so. You're already teaching Maisie half the time, and you have the patience for it. Colt nodded. It's good work. Honorable work. If that's what you want, we'll make sure you get the education you need. It would mean more schooling, Eliza said. Maybe even going away to a normal school someday. That costs money. We'll figure it out, Colt said firmly. That mining claim your father left? It's sitting in trust. When you're older, that'll be yours and Maisie's. You can use it however you want. Education's as good a use as any. Eliza felt emotion tighten her throat. A year ago, she'd had nothing. No future, no prospects, no hope beyond the next meal. Now she was sitting at a table with people who believed in her, who were willing to invest in her dreams. Thank you, she whispered. Nothing to thank us for, Evelyn said. That's what families do. As November settled in, bringing the first real snows, Eliza found herself thinking more and more about the future, not with fear, but with anticipation. She imagined herself standing in front of a classroom, helping children sound out words the way Miss Winters had helped her. She imagined making a difference in young lives the way Colt and Evelyn had made a difference in hers. It felt like purpose, like direction, like something worth working toward. One Saturday morning, Colt announced he had a surprise. He led them all out to the barn, where a wooden crate sat in the corner, something inside it moving and whimpering. Maisie's eyes went huge. Is that a puppy? Colt confirmed, lifting the lid. Inside was a squirming ball of brown and white fur, all oversized paws and floppy ears. Sheepdog mix. Samuel Cross's dog had a litter, and I thought we could use some help around here. Maisie shrieked and reached for the puppy, who immediately started licking her face with enthusiastic kisses. Eliza couldn't help laughing at the sight, her little sister covered in puppy slobber, giggling so hard she could barely breathe. What should we name him? Evelyn asked. They debated for hours, throwing out suggestions and vetoing them. Finally, Maisie declared, Ranger, because he'll help us on the ranch. And so Ranger it was. The puppy quickly became a beloved member of the household, following them everywhere and getting into everything. He chewed shoes and stole food from the table and made messes that drove Evelyn to distraction, but he also brought joy and laughter in equal measure. Watching Maisie play with Ranger in the snow, Eliza felt something settle deeper inside her. This was what childhood should look like. Not fear and hunger and loss, but puppies and snow angels and unbridled delight. Maisie was getting the childhood Eliza had never had, and that felt like a gift beyond measure. December brought the holidays, and this year they felt different. Last Christmas had been their first with Colt and Evelyn, everything still new and uncertain. This year, they were a real family, established, secure. Evelyn spent weeks preparing, baking cookies and pies, and planning a special dinner. Colt brought home a small pine tree, and they decorated it with strings of popcorn and paper ornaments Maisie had made at school. The house smelled of cinnamon and pine and wood smoke, scents that would forever mean home to Eliza. On Christmas morning, they exchanged gifts around the tree. Evelyn had sewn Eliza a beautiful new coat, deep green wool with brass buttons. Colt had carved Maisie a wooden dollhouse, complete with tiny furniture. For Evelyn, Colt presented a delicate music box that played a soft, sweet melody. And for Colt, Evelyn had knitted a thick scarf in rich brown yarn. But the gift that made Eliza's breath catch was the one Colt presented to both girls together. He handed them a leather-bound book, the cover embossed with gold lettering, The Brennan Family History. It's blank, he explained. For now. But I thought we could fill it together, write down our stories, the important moments, so we always remember how we became a family. Eliza ran her fingers over the smooth leather, feeling the weight of it. A family history. Something permanent. Something that said they mattered enough to be remembered. Can I write first? Maisie asked eagerly. Of course, Colt said. They spent the afternoon taking turns writing in the book. Maisie's entry was simple, printed in careful letters. We were lost, and Mama and Papa found us, and now we are happy. Evelyn wrote about the day Colt had proposed in the store, how terrified and hopeful she'd been all at once. Colt wrote about opening the door to find two dying girls on his porch, and knowing immediately that his life was about to change forever. When it was Eliza's turn, she stared at the blank page for a long time, trying to find the right words. Finally, she wrote, "We knocked on a stranger's door because we had nowhere else to go. He could have turned us away. Instead, he gave us everything. He and Evelyn chose us when they didn't have to, and that choice saved our lives. We were broken pieces, but together we made something whole. We made a family." She set down the pen and looked around at the three people who had become her world. Colt with his quiet strength, Evelyn with her fierce love, Maisie with her innocent joy. This was her family. Not perfect, but real. Not born, but built. And that made it all the more precious. The winter passed in a comfortable pattern of work and school and family time. Eliza continued to excel in her studies, and Miss Winters began giving her extra books to read, challenging her to think more deeply about mathematics and literature. Sarah and Emma and Ruth became true friends, the kind who knew her secrets and made her laugh until she cried. Thomas Miller worked up the courage to speak to her at the Valentine's Day social, stammering through an invitation to share a piece of cake. Eliza said yes, and they sat together awkwardly, talking about nothing in particular. It wasn't romance, they were both too young for that, but it was sweet and normal, and Eliza treasured the normalcy of it. In March, as the snow began to melt and the first signs of spring appeared, Evelyn gathered them all together with an announcement. "I'm expecting," she said, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "The baby should come in September." For a moment, there was stunned silence. Then Maisie let out a shriek of delight and threw herself at Evelyn, and Colt was pulling his wife into his arms, his face transformed with joy. Eliza felt her own eyes sting with tears. A baby. A brother or sister for her and Maisie. A child born into this family they'd built, who would never know what it was like to be unwanted or afraid. "Are you happy?" Evelyn asked, looking at Eliza with slight concern. "I know it'll change things. I'm happy," Eliza said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "I'm so happy I could burst." The pregnancy became the center of their world. They prepared the downstairs guest room as a nursery, painting it a cheerful yellow and building a cradle from scratch. Evelyn taught Eliza to knit, and together they made tiny blankets and booties. Maisie insisted on sewing a stuffed rabbit, her stitches clumsy but heartfelt. As Evelyn's belly grew, so did the sense of anticipation in the house. This baby would be the final piece, the one that made their family feel complete and unbreakable. Summer arrived, hot and golden. Eliza finished the school year at the top of her class, and Miss Winters pulled her aside on the last day. "I've written to the normal school in Helena," she said, "told them about you. When you're ready, there'll be a place for you there." "Thank you," Eliza said, overwhelmed. "Thank you for believing in me." "Easy to believe in someone who works as hard as you do," Miss Winters replied. As harvest time approached, Evelyn grew larger and more uncomfortable. Colt fussed over her constantly, and she bore it with amused patience. Eliza and Maisie took over more of the household chores, working together to keep everything running smoothly. One evening in early September, as the sun was setting in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Evelyn's labor began. Colt rode for the midwife while Eliza helped Evelyn to bed, her heart pounding with equal parts excitement and fear. She'd been present when her mother died, but she'd never witnessed a birth. Didn't know what to expect. "It's all right," Evelyn said, seeing her expression. "This is natural, painful, but natural." The midwife arrived and shooed Eliza from the room. She sat on the stairs with Maisie and Colt, listening to the sounds from above. Hours passed. Maisie fell asleep against Eliza's shoulder. Colt paced, wearing a path in the floorboards. Finally, as dawn was breaking, they heard it. A thin, reedy cry that grew stronger and more insistent. The midwife appeared at the top of the stairs, smiling. "You have a son. Mother and baby are both well." Colt took the stairs 3 at a time. Eliza and Maisie followed more slowly, entering the room to find Evelyn propped up in bed, exhausted and radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in one of their handmade blankets. "Come meet your brother," she said softly. They crowded around, staring in wonder at the impossibly small person in Evelyn's arms. He had a shock of dark hair and colt's nose, and tiny, perfect fingers that curled around Maisie's when she offered them. "What's his name?" Eliza whispered. Colt and Evelyn exchanged a glance. "We were thinking James," Colt said. "After your father." Eliza felt her throat close with emotion. "Really?" "He's part of this family too," Evelyn said. "Part of the story that brought us together. It feels right to honor him." James Brennan, their brother, born into love and safety and belonging. Eliza reached out and touched his tiny hand, marveling at the warmth of him, the reality. This was new life, new hope, a new chapter in their family's story. The weeks that followed were chaotic and exhausting and wonderful. James was a demanding baby, crying often and sleeping rarely. But he was also sweet and perfect, and they all fell hopelessly in love with him. Eliza learned to change diapers and warm bottles. Maisie sang to him when he cried, her voice high and earnest. Colt walked him around the house at 3 a.m, murmuring soft reassurances. And Evelyn moved through it all with the kind of grace that came from deep contentment. One afternoon, while James was napping and the house was briefly quiet, Eliza found Colt on the porch, looking out at the ranch with a thoughtful expression. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, settling beside him. He smiled. "Just thinking about how much has changed. 2 years ago, I was alone in this house with nothing but memories and regrets. Now look at it, full of life and noise and purpose." "Do you ever miss the quiet?" Eliza asked. "Not even a little bit." He put his arm around her shoulders. "You know what I realized? I spent 4 years thinking I'd failed Grace, that I'd been too late to save her, but I wasn't too late for you and Maisie. And maybe that's what I was supposed to learn, that it's never too late to save someone, never too late to build something good." "You saved us," Eliza said quietly. "But we saved you too." Colt's eyes were bright. "Yeah, you did." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink lower. Finally, Eliza spoke again. "I've been thinking about what I want to do after I finish school." "Teaching?" "Yes, but not just teaching. I want to help girls like me and Maisie, girls who've lost everything. I want to show them that life can get better, that there are people who will fight for them." "That's a good dream," Colt said. "A worthy one." "I'm going to make it real," Eliza said with quiet determination. "No matter how long it takes." Autumn settled over the ranch once more, bringing with it the familiar rhythms of harvest and preparation for winter. But this year felt different, settled, secure. They weren't building something new anymore. They were maintaining something established, something that would last. One evening in late October, almost exactly 2 years after that first desperate knock on Colt's door, the family gathered in the parlor. James was asleep in his cradle. Ranger sprawled on the rug by the fire. Evelyn was mending while Colt read the newspaper. Maisie worked on her schoolwork, tongue poking out in concentration. And Eliza sat with the family history book open in her lap, adding a new entry. "James was born in September," she wrote. "He's beautiful and loud and already loved beyond measure. Maisie started 3rd grade and is learning to read longer books. I'm studying hard, preparing for normal school someday. Mama's the strongest person I know, and Papa still makes her laugh every day. Ranger is almost full grown now and thinks he's a lapdog. We're happy, we're whole, we're home." She paused, then added one final line. "This is what family looks like when you build it with love instead of blood. This is what miracles look like in ordinary moments. This is everything." Maisie looked up from her work. "What are you writing, Liza?" "Our story," Eliza said, "so we never forget how far we came." "Read it to us," Evelyn suggested, setting down her mending. So Eliza did. She started from the beginning, from that scorching August day when she'd pulled a sheet over their mother's body and made the hardest choice of her young life. She read about the walk down that burning road, about the knock on a stranger's door, about Colt's decision to open it instead of closing them out forever. She read about Evelyn's brave choice to marry a man she barely knew to save 2 orphan girls, about the courthouse battle with Silas and the fear that had haunted them for months, about the slow transformation from arrangement to real love, from strangers to family. She read about birthdays and holidays, about school and friends, and a puppy named Ranger, about Evelyn's pregnancy and James's birth, about every small moment that had built into something large and lasting and unbreakable. When she finally closed the book, there were tears on everyone's faces. "That's quite a story," Colt said, his voice rough. "It's our story," Eliza replied, "and it's not finished yet. There's so much more to come." "You're right," Evelyn said, wiping her eyes. "This is just the beginning." As winter approached and the nights grew longer, Eliza found herself thinking about the future with excitement instead of fear. She would finish school. She would go to normal school. She would become a teacher. She would help other lost girls find their way home. But no matter how far she went or what she achieved, she would always carry this ranch with her, this family, this love. One snowy evening in December, Colt came home from town with something tucked under his coat. He gathered them all in the parlor and pulled out a carved wooden sign, the letters burned deep into the wood with careful precision. "I had this made," he said, holding it up so they could see. "Thought we should make it official." The sign read, "The Brennan Ranch, established. 1880, home of Colt, Evelyn, Eliza, Maisie, and James." "It's perfect," Evelyn breathed. The next morning, Colt mounted it at the entrance to their property. Eliza stood beside him, watching as he secured it to the posts, making it straight and true. "Now everyone will know," she said. "Know what? That we belong here, that this is our home." Colt climbed down from the ladder and stood beside her, both of them looking at the sign. "It was always your home, Eliza, from the moment you knocked on that door." "I know," she said, "but now it's real in a way I can see, in a way everyone can see." They walked back to the house together, their boots crunching in the snow. Smoke curled from the chimney. Light glowed warm in the windows. Through the glass, Eliza could see Evelyn moving in the kitchen, Maisie playing with James on the floor. Home. Not the place she was born, but the place she was made whole, made new, made into the person she was always meant to be. She thought about that girl on the burning road, desperate and afraid, carrying her sister toward an uncertain future. If she could go back and tell that girl what was waiting at the end of that road, a father who would fight for her, a mother who would choose her, a family built on something stronger than blood, would that girl even believe it? Probably not. It would have sounded too good to be true, too much like a fairy tale. But it wasn't a fairy tale. It was real, hard-won and precious and absolutely real. That evening, after supper, Colt suggested they carve something new for the mantel, something that represented their complete family. He worked for hours while they watched, the wood shavings curling at his feet, his hands steady and sure. When he finished, he held it up. 5 pairs of boots carved in perfect detail, 2 large, 3 small, 1 tiny. Beneath them, he'd carved the words, "The Brennan Family, 1882. They placed it on the mantel next to the photograph and the embroidered sampler, 3 pieces of evidence that this family existed, that they mattered, that they were real. Eliza stood back and looked at it all. The carving, the photograph, the sampler, the life they'd built together from broken pieces and desperate choices. 5 weeks had passed between that knock on Colt's door and the moment he and Evelyn had married. 5 weeks that had changed everything. 5 weeks that had taken them from strangers to something far more powerful. But it was the 2 years since that had truly made them a family. 2 years of choosing each other every single day. 2 years of building trust and love and belonging. She thought about her mother, buried beneath Montana earth. Thought about her father, lost to a mine collapse. And she knew, deep in her bones, that they would be proud. Proud that she'd saved Maisie. Proud that she'd found people worthy of trust. Proud that she'd built a life worth living. "Liza?" Maisie tugged on her sleeve. "Are you crying?" Eliza touched her face and found it wet, but she was smiling. "Happy tears," she said, "the best kind." That night, as she lay in bed listening to Maisie's soft breathing and the creaks and groans of the house settling around them, Eliza made a promise to herself. She would never take this for granted, never forget how precious and fragile and hard-won it was. Never stop being grateful for the day Colt Brennan had opened his door instead of closing it. Because that single choice, that moment of compassion in the face of grief and fear, had saved 2 lives, had created a family, had proved that sometimes miracles looked like ordinary kindness offered at exactly the right moment, She closed her eyes and let sleep come, safe in the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new challenges and joys, and that she would face them all surrounded by people who loved her. Not because they had to, because they chose to, and that made all the difference. The Brennan family had been built on a foundation of choice and love and stubborn refusal to give up on each other. It had weathered storms and threats and doubts. It had grown stronger with each challenge overcome, and it would endure. Through winters and summers, through good years and hard ones, through all the ordinary moments and extraordinary ones that make up a life. Because they belong to each other now, completely, finally, forever. And nothing, not blood, not law, not distance or time, could ever change that. This was home. This was family. This was everything worth fighting for, and they had won.